My name is Robert Houghton, and I'm a senior lecturer in medieval history at the University of Winchester. Most of my research addresses Italy in the Central Middle Ages, but I also work on the representation of history in modern games. On the 19th of November, I delivered a paper at the Apocalypse and Utopia conference titled "There Will Be a Reckoning: Galactic Apocalypse as Endgame in Stellaris." The end of the world is an alarmingly common element within science fiction strategy games. Games from Master of Orion to Space Empires provide the player with a plethora of means to obliterate planets and stars. But these extinction events generally pass without fanfare. When an empire spans multiple star systems, the destruction of a planet can become a quiet inconvenience rather than an apocalyptic culmination of revelations, plot, and lore. The creators of Stellaris, namely Paradox Interactive, have taken a different approach to Apocalypse through their endgame crisis events. These events provide a number of possible galaxy-wide threats, ranging from swarms of alien locusts, to ancient omnicidal machines, to invaders from another dimension, and an interstellar Faustian entity. But it's not simply the scale of these cataclysms which sets them apart from those more typical of this genre. These crises are apocalypses in the traditional sense, calamitous events preceded by a series of revelations, of hidden and typically forbidden knowledge, often with inherently religious undertones. These complex and nuanced events are firmly embedded within the mechanics and design of the game, rather than simply the inevitable consequence of an interstellar arms race. The use of apocalypse within Stellaris creates a depth to the game's world unusual to the genre. The crisis events form part of a series of procedurally generated but intertwined elements of narrative, which build a backdrop of a complex, ancient, and ultimately perilously dangerous universe. Throughout the game, the player is confronted by civilizations and entities vastly more powerful than themselves, and the challenge of the crisis events form a suitable coda for the emergent story. Whether the player emerges victorious or succumbs to these final threats, they provide a suitable point of drama, and in doing so, they overcome one of the most common complaints about strategy games, the issue of boring endgames. The ultimate outcome of many strategy games is decided long before the end of the game. Players frequently obtain an unassailable lead by the mid-game, leaving the remainder of the game as a time-consuming and ultimately unfulfilling mopping-up exercise. In other cases, players are left behind by their computer opponents and forced into a game of survival with no chance of completing their objectives. By introducing a powerful endgame threat which is nevertheless in keeping with the game's world and lore, the developers of Stellaris largely avert this issue of boring endgames. If the player is in a dominant position, the endgame crisis provides them with a new challenge. Conversely, if the player is on the ropes, then the crisis provides them with a new avenue towards a last-minute victory. At the very least, the endgame becomes more interesting. This type of apocalyptic endgame has been used within a variety of historical strategy games, albeit on a smaller scale. Most typically, this takes the form of a large external force entering the arena in the late game. The Mongols and the Huns are often used in this role. Other apocalypses designed to challenge the player and to change the gameplay have also made appearances, ranging from climate catastrophes in Civilization to the Black Death in Crusader Kings. There's plenty of appetite for this sort of endgame and the variety it can bring to this genre. However, there's a reluctance to follow apocalyptic endgames to their logical conclusion, and actually allow the apocalypse to happen, to allow the empire to fall, to allow the player to lose. Games are built on progress. In the case of strategy games, this means territorial expansion and the development of more powerful technologies, more powerful weapons. Taking this progress away at the last minute and denying the player victory stands against core design principles. As a result, games must provide easily defeated Mongol hordes, or avoidable climate disaster, or else they run the risk of accusations of unreasonable mechanics and arbitrary losses. Endgame apocalypses are often hollow threats as a result. But I don't think that has to be the case. There is a growing market for games with punishing and even arbitrary mechanics, from Dwarf Fortress to the plethora of roguelikes, so the unfair apocalypse is perhaps not as much of a deterrent as is commonly thought. More importantly though, maybe we need to change the way we think about games and victory. Do we have to win to have fun? Does victory have to equate to building a global and eternal empire? Do we have to defeat the apocalypse to win. Ultimately, there's plenty of potential for Apocalypse as endgame mechanic in both science fiction and historical strategy games, but to get the most out of it, we may need to change the way we think about play and victory. Thank you very much. I've been Robert Houghton. Cheers.